Sadia Rizvi and I am an associate at PPM Attorneys. This video is part 2 and the final part of the series on deceptive designs and dark patterns. Today I will be discussing deceptive designs and its relation to data protection. To recap on the concept of deceptive designs, they are considered to be features of an interface or an application that serves to trick users into doing things that they may not want to do. This can be done in various ways, such as confusing or misleading language or the use of undue pressure to compel a user to take an action. As a user, when you first interact with a free digital platform such as Google or Facebook, you are considered to be paying for it by sharing your personal information with the service provider. On some platforms, your information is used by the service provider to display targeted advertising. Service providers are therefore highly incentivized to collect as much information about you as possible. You as the user cannot see what is done with your data and how many third parties it is shared with. In South Africa, the law that regulates the right to privacy and respect of personal information is PROPIA, the Protection of Personal Information Act. The essence of this act means that organizations have an obligation to process and store the personal information of individuals responsibly and, amongst other things, to limit the amount of personal information they collect and use. Processing personal information requires a legal ground and ensuring that the processing complies with the 8 conditions listed under the Act. The Act further requires that personal information should be collected for a clear purpose and it should not be used for other incompatible purposes and must be deleted when it is no longer necessary. The requirement of minimality provides that organizations should only collect and keep information that is needed to perform a task and nothing more. Lastly, Section 18 of the Act means that individuals must receive an explanation in a clear and understandable manner of what personal information is collected and for what purposes. A digital service provider must process personal information lawfully. For example, a digital service provider can process personal information to fulfill the terms of a contract or to comply with the legal obligation imposed on them. If the personal information is processed for other reasons, then consent from the individual must be obtained. Under the Act, consent means any voluntary, specific, and informed expression of will in terms of which permission is given for the processing of personal information. PROPIA requires that different uses of personal information requires separate consent from data subjects. Users of digital platforms must therefore have choices to limit different forms of data collection and use. Sometimes, deceptive designs may violate the privacy rights of individuals on applications and user interfaces. Practically, this means that certain user interfaces and applications contain misleading languages and other techniques that causes users to consent to the lowest possible privacy settings. Users are given the illusion of control over their privacy settings. However, users are compelled to choose the most privacy intrusive option. Examples of this includes misleading wording, settings that are privacy intrusive by default, hidden privacy-friendly choices, and instances where the application or the interface makes it difficult for the user to choose privacy-friendly settings. It is important to note that although these practices may not directly violate privacy laws and privacy rights of users, they are considered to be as unethical. This raises the question of whether the requirements of consent have been met, that is, whether the consent was explicit, informed, and freely given. The use of these deceptive designs can be considered as an attempt to push users to make choices that only benefits the service provider. Some default privacy settings on digital platforms allow for the widespread collection and use of personal information. Research has shown that many users will never look at or even change the default settings. Because of this, many digital service providers drive users to opt in to personalized advertising, thereby nudging users to give away more of their personal information. Personal information that is processed outside of the primary function of the service provider should not be enabled by default. Service providers should allow users to choose how their personal information is used to serve personalized advertising or experiences. Since the default option is the easiest option for the user, leading users to the alternatives through a long and onerous process is an effective dark pattern or deceptive design. Therefore, defaulting to the least privacy-friendly options may be considered as unethical practices. Organizations are starting to face the consequences for the use of deceptive designs. In January 2022, the French Data Protection Authority hit Facebook and Google with multi-million-dollar fines for the use of deceptive design in their cookie consent banners. Both companies were technically compliant to the provisions of their privacy laws. However, the Data Protection Authority found that the opt-out process for cookies was confusing and unclear. In other jurisdictions across the world, comprehensive data privacy laws have begun to include prohibitions on dark patterns. The new California Privacy Rights Act prohibits the use of dark patterns to obtain consent. Companies who use these tactics could face severe administrative penalties. As an organization, you may want to consider reviewing your online service offerings to minimize the risk of litigation and serious penalties. Consider making some of the following changes to your digital offerings. Number 1. Review your click wrap and privacy consent for hidden elements. Ensure that they convey the correct information and that users are properly aware of their choices to consent to cookies and personalized advertising. Opting out should be as easy as opting in. Number 2. Replace clever language with neutral and concise language. Do not use confirm shaming tactics and ensure that the language used is plain and clear. Number 3. Explain the consequences of the choices that users make. When users want to consent or withdraw their consent, this information must be conveyed in a clear and neutral manner. Number 4. Ensure consistency across devices. If you utilize desktop and mobile applications, ensure that all platforms and privacy settings are consistently applied. Number 5. Implement a simple offboarding procedure. If a user would like to deactivate or delete their account, ensure that this process is simple and does not take up more time or energy than the onboarding process. Lastly, it is recommended that all organizations assess the user interfaces for dark patterns. This can reduce your company's legal risk, and making the user experience clearer and easier to use will also produce happier consumers. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you have learned a little bit about deceptive designs. Don't forget to like and share this video if you enjoyed it. If you would like more content by PPM attorneys, please subscribe and check out our social media links below. See you next time.